Dr. Elena Vasquez had been working on her gravitational wave amplifier for 3 years when the Kethtar warships descended upon Research Station Omega-7. She barely had time to encrypt her data before the alien boarding parties breached the hull, their chitinous forms clicking through the corridors with predatory efficiency. The Kethtar were known throughout the galaxy as slavers and raiders, their insectoid faces betraying no emotion as they herded the human researchers into the station's central hub. Their translator devices crackled with mechanical precision. As their commander, a towering figure with razor-sharp mandibles addressed the terrified scientists. "You will continue your research under our supervision," the alien declared, its compound eyes scanning the group. "Those who comply will live. Those who resist will feed our larvae." Elena's colleagues trembled, but she remained still, her mind racing. The Kethtar had no understanding of what they'd stumbled upon. Her gravitational wave amplifier wasn't just another piece of human technology. It was a device that could theoretically manipulate space-time itself on a localized scale. In the wrong hands or with the wrong modifications, it could become something far more dangerous. For weeks, Elena worked under constant surveillance, her every movement watched by Kethtar guards whose weapons never strayed far from her colleagues. The aliens forced her to explain her research, demanding practical applications for their war machine. They wanted weapons, shields, faster-than-light communication arrays, anything that could give them an edge over their enemies. Elena complied, at least superficially. She demonstrated the device's ability to detect minute gravitational distortions, to map space-time curvature with unprecedented precision. The Kethtar commander was pleased, ordering her to scale up the technology for military use. What the aliens didn't understand was that Elena had been born on Kepler 442b, a world where the gravitational field was 1.3 times that of Earth. Growing up under that crushing weight had given her an intuitive understanding of gravitational forces that few humans possessed. More importantly, her parents had been survivors of the Proxima Centauri disaster, an industrial accident that had taught humanity hard lessons about the dangers of uncontrolled gravitational manipulation. Elena knew exactly what her amplifier could do if modified incorrectly. As days turned into weeks, she carefully introduced improvements to the device. Each modification seemed logical to the Kethtar overseers, designed to increase the amplifier's range and sensitivity. Elena explained that the changes would allow them to detect enemy fleets from greater distances, to map entire star systems in real time. The aliens were eager to test their new weapon. They demanded a demonstration using the largest possible power source, the station's fusion reactor itself. Elena tried to dissuade them, explaining the theoretical risks of feedback, loops and cascade failures. But the Kethtar commander dismissed her concerns as human cowardice. Their species had conquered dozens of worlds. They would not be deterred by the warnings of a primitive mammal. On the day of the test, Elena stood in the observation deck, watching as Kethtar technicians made the final connections to her modified amplifier. Her hands were steady, her expression calm, but inside she was counting down the seconds. The device activated with a low hum that seemed to resonate through the station's superstructure. At first, everything appeared normal. The gravitational sensors registered the expected readings, detecting the orbital patterns of nearby asteroids and the distant pull of the system's star. Then, Elena engaged the amplification sequence. The Kethtar had no word for resonance cascade in their language. They had no understanding of how gravitational waves could be amplified and redirected, how a small distortion could grow exponentially when fed back through itself in an endless loop. They certainly had no concept of how a skilled physicist could weaponize the very fabric of space-time. The first sign of trouble was a subtle vibration in the station's hull. The Kethtar guards looked around nervously as the metal began to groan under stresses that shouldn't have existed. Elena's modified amplifier was creating a localized distortion in space-time, a growing bubble of twisted gravity that expanded outward from the device at the speed of light. Within the first 30 seconds, the Kethtar closest to the amplifier began to experience severe disorientation as their inner ears registered gravitational forces pulling in impossible directions. The commander screamed orders, demanding that Elena shut down the device, but it was already too late. The gravitational cascade had reached critical mass. Elena watched with grim satisfaction as the Kethtar warships, caught in the expanding field, began to buckle and twist like paper sculptures in a hurricane. Their hulls, designed to withstand conventional weapons and the vacuum of space, were never meant to resist the fundamental forces of the universe itself. The insectoid aliens tried to flee, but their ships were trapped in a web of distorted spacetime. Some vessels were crushed instantly as gravitational tides compressed them beyond their structural limits. Others were torn apart as differential forces pulled their bow and stern sections in opposite directions. The Kethtar commander, its mandibles clicking frantically, grabbed Elena by the throat and demanded she reverse the process. She looked into its compound eyes with the steady gaze of someone who had already accepted the consequences of her actions. "There is no reverse," she said simply. "You wanted a weapon. This is what weapons do." The gravitational wave cascade consumed the Kethtar fleet in less than 10 minutes. Their screams echoed through the station's corridors as the fundamental forces they had sought to harness turned against them. Some were liquefied by tidal forces that stretched and compressed their bodies beyond recognition. Others simply ceased to exist as the warped spacetime around them collapsed into temporary microsingularities. Elena died with the rest of them, of course. The cascade she had engineered was indiscriminate, and the research station was at the epicenter of the gravitational storm. But in her final moments, as the observation deck began to buckle and the stars outside twisted into impossible spirals, she felt a profound sense of satisfaction. The Kethtar had underestimated humanity's greatest strength, not their technology or their physical prowess, but their willingness to sacrifice everything to protect what they held dear. They had taken a human scientist hostage, thinking they could exploit her knowledge for their own ends. They had learned, too late, that when cornered, humans didn't just fight back, they took their enemies down with them. The gravitational cascade eventually dissipated, leaving behind only twisted metal and the fading echoes of spacetime's angry protest. The Kethtar fleet was gone, erased so completely that not even debris remained. And across the galaxy, other species would eventually learn the lesson that the insectoid slavers had paid for with their extinction. Never underestimate what a human will do when they have nothing left to lose.